listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you will remember exactly where you were and what you were doing on September 11th, 2001. 9/11, the day that not just the United States, but the entire world was changed forever. My guest today had as close as an encounter as one could have on that day. He was on the 84th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center, the second tower hit. He was one of the lucky ones that day, one of only 18 people to escape from within or above where the plane struck. Brian Clark is here to share his experience from that day, 23 years later, and he still has a vivid memory and recollection of the tragedy. One of the most eloquent speakers I have ever heard, Brian walks us through the day's events leading up to the attack, what he thought when the first tower was hit, and when he knew that this was an act of terror and not an accident. What did he say to his wife when he called her, and why did she spend hours thinking he hadn't escaped? Brian shares the choices and decisions he had to make that followed his tower being hit that led him safely down 84 flights of stairs, and also the mysterious newfound friend he would find along the way. I feel so honored to have sat across from him while he shared this story, and I cannot wait for you to all hear it as well. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with 9/11 survivor, Brian Clark. Well, welcome to the podcast. Today I have Brian Clark here with me, and I am so honored to have you here to share your story. I think people are just going to find this just miraculous, but also amazing. So I'm so thankful for you to be here.
Pleasure.
Brian, you were on the 84th floor of the second tower on 9/11, the World Trade Center. And one of the things I heard you say, I'm just going to read this so I don't mess it up. You said that you believe you were given the gift where you can tell your story and that you have not been haunted by it. So I'm so glad to have you here today to tell your story.
I stick by that statement. I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that I'm not haunted. I haven't had one nightmare.
Yeah, when you told me that, I couldn't believe it.
Since the event, yeah.
Well, and I was very lucky to connect with you. For people who don't know, you grew up in Canada. You're actually from Canada.
Yep.
And your wife and my mom went to nursing school together.
That's correct.
At a school called McMaster in Hamilton, Ontario. So you've all kept in touch. When did you move to America?
It was in July of 1974 when our rather small company of a dozen people moved to New York City with fingers crossed and one-way airplane tickets, hoping that our venture would work out. And lo and behold, it did. So
you moved for work?
Moved for work, yes.
All right. Right. And were you straight to the World Trade Center?
Yes, we were first tenants on the sixth floor of one of the outlying buildings, 5 World Trade Center.
Okay.
And then I think it was, 7 years later, I think it was in 1981, we had expanded, needed more space, so we moved to the 31st floor of the North Tower.
Okay.
And then, get my timing right here. I haven't reviewed this in a while. I'm guessing 10 years later, it was now time to expand yet again. And the space we then occupied was the 84th floor of the South Tower.
Okay. And so your wife, Diane, you had 4 children.
Correct.
So by the time 9/11 came around, they were older? Were they already adults?
Well, yes. Let's do some math here. 2001. My baby was born in 1980, so she was 21 at the time, and the others, the eldest would be 31. There was 10 years between top and bottom, with the number 2 and number 3 in between that 10-year span.
Were they all living in New York at the time?
They were in the area at the time, other than my youngest daughter was in Toronto, attending University of Toronto.
Okay, following after her parents' footsteps. So the morning of 9/11, you still live same house in New Jersey as you did that day?
At the moment, well, we moved 2 years ago.
Okay.
But we were 47 years in the same house in Mahwah, New Jersey, which is a commuting suburb of Manhattan.
Okay. So can you just take us back to that morning and kind of like when you just getting up, commuting, was it a normal day, kind of like what you would go through on the way to work?
There was nothing extraordinary about it until later that morning. Yeah, I would rise at 5:25 was my alarm time. Shower, shave, a bowl of cereal, and out the door by 6 to get a train at 6:15.
Okay.
It was about a 10 or 12-minute drive to the train station, and I had the time. After so many years, I had the timing down rather well. Got on that 6:15 train, which would then get me into the office at the Trade Center by 7:05, something like that.
Was that pretty was that a pretty normal time for most people to be getting to work that day, or was that early?
Well, rush hour kind of gets spread. I would guess we're earlier than many, but there were lots of people on my train, working the same hours as I was. But Manhattan's rush hour traffic spreads from 5:30 in the morning till 9 a.m. sort of thing. So we were on the early side, but it worked. The trains were very comfortable, always on time, winter and summer, and air conditioned or heated. It was a good commute. It was private time. You could read, wind up in the morning, or wind down at night.
Okay.
And then a subway under the river from Hoboken, and that went right into the basement of the World Trade Center. So it was pretty much an indoor commute the whole way.
Up to the 84th floor?
Yep.
How long did it take you to get up to the 84th floor?
Well, we had to change elevators, actually.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, there are, in those towers, they're nominally 110 stories. I think the elevator stopped at 107, so I don't know how they figured out those last 2 or 3 floors, but there were 2 what they called sky lobbies, one at 44, one at 78. So if you worked on the 50th floor, you would take an express to 44, cross the hallway, and find a local elevator up to 50.
Okay.
For us on 84, we would ride an express to 78, go across the hallway, and find the local elevator that went from 78 up to, I think it was 86.
Okay.
So I'd get off at 84 with all my coworkers.
How many people were on your floor? How about that?
Round numbers, 250.
Okay, on your floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you, that was going to be a dumb question. Do you remember what you were doing? Do you remember what you were doing kind of just leading up to when you heard that? You talk about hearing like a boom in the first tower.
Yeah, very much. I've told the story enough times with some clarity. I have the good recollection. I had found my way to my office. Each of those towers, by the way, were square, and the footprint was a full acre. It's 208 feet by 208 feet. My personal office, I used to work out on the trading floor. We were a brokerage firm that traded interbank deposits, not equities. It was an international capital market. The 350 largest banks in the world were our financial institutions, rather, were our customers. Okay. So I was now classified as a dinosaur. It was a young person's game, and I was 54 at the time. Okay. So it was time to not retire because there was management responsibilities. I did lots of negotiation and commissions and that sort of thing. But I had made my way back to my office, which was on this west wall of the South Tower, near the south corner. And I had my back to just like I'm sitting in this chair, I'm typing at my keyboard. 2 yards behind me was the glass windows. And if I turned around and looked out those windows, it was a lovely unobstructed view out over the Hudson and back to New Jersey. Okay. And you could see a long way.
Could you see the other tower from your window?
No. No. From the north wall on our tower, you could easily see the north tower, which would have been a little bit to the northwest of us.
Okay. But you had a view of the Hudson.
But I had a view of the Hudson. And on the south wall, you looked out unobstructed over New York Harbor and the Statue of Liberty and Staten Island. And again, but we took all of that for granted. After so many years, you don't notice in a funny sort of way. But at 8:45, I'm typing on my keyboard back to the window. And at 8:46, there was this loud boom, boom, like a double explosion. And the lights above me flickered. And my head jerked up, and my peripheral vision caught something behind me, and I spun around in my chair, and just a couple of yards away, outside the glass, 84 floors in the air, swirling flames. Like, what's this? I sort of...
Like in the air? It looked like they were swirling?
Yeah, they were. They were right up against the glass. And then they dissipated after 2 or 3 seconds, and out in the airspace, 84 floors in the air, was these papers, singed papers, just floating. Well, this is weird stuff. What's going on here? after the 93 bombing, I'd been asked to be one of the fire safety wardens on our floor.
So you were in the building as well when the bombing happened?
Yes, in 93, yes. And after that, the World Trade Center had asked people to volunteer to be floor fire safety.
Which meant what?
Well, they trained us in evacuation procedures. We had to know where all the fireboxes were, where all the alarms were, where all the stairs were, and how we would direct people in an evacuation. They gave us a flashlight and a reflective vest and a red cap, so we would stand out in a crowd, and a whistle around my neck. So I reached up. Now that we're back to the time when the boom boom happened next door, in my overhead credenza, I grabbed the flashlight and the reflective vest and put the whistle around my neck, and I went out.
What did you think it was when you heard the boom and saw the...
Well, what I thought incorrectly was that a welder, a construction worker, a couple of floors up, a welder had hit a gas line and the explosion had spilled out of the building and past my window.
So you thought it was in your building?
I thought it was in our building, and dangerous is too strong a word, but alarming,
right?
But I didn't think it was what it was.
So
I
you
had
just
no
thought,
concept.
I need to evacuate.
Yeah, or no. At that moment, I was thinking, I've got to find out what this is. My job is to direct people. Now, should we be going up or down? I had to figure that out, if you like. So I went out of my office, and sort of in that area, we now had all our accounting people, our lawyers, and it was sort of an administrative area, if you like. It wasn't our technology department. They were on the other side of the building, and it wasn't trading floor. But I quickly learned that all the brokers on the east side of our building had gone up to the north wall and had their faces pressed against the glass, looking up 9 floors to the 93rd floor in the North Tower, where there was a ring of fire around the North Tower. Nobody knew what had happened. We had TV sets all over the trading floor. So we were informed, just like anybody in Stockholm or Singapore was suddenly getting
you were watching it with the rest of
these
the
live
world.
pictures. They were on our TVs as well. But we also had this 9-floor visual.
Could you see a plane?
No, nobody had seen the plane, just the fire around the whole 93rd floor of the North Tower.
Like, what are people doing in that moment? Like, they're staring at fire
and not thinking at all what it was. There was, on the TV, we were hearing, a small plane may have hit the Trade Center. Rumor has it, or whatever. Nobody knew what had happened at that time. One particular woman, Susan Polio, her name was near the glass looking up, and she then saw somebody jump. And
from the building.
The people next door were starting to jump. They were trapped by fire, and this is, rather than burned to death, this is the decision they made. They somehow knocked the glass out and jumped out the window. I did not see that, and I didn't want to see that. And so Susan came back from the window in tears. She said, "Brian, people are dying." I said, "Susan, come on, let's get you a little more composed." Put my arm around her, and I walked her off that side of the trading floor, away from those north windows, and through the center core of our tower. The rentable space in the Trade Center, the tower buildings, was all around the outside. The center core was where the elevator shafts were, the bathrooms, the electric closets, and so on. And in the middle of that core, there were 2 crossed hallways, north, south, east, west. So I took her from the east side to the west side, down that hallway, and let her off she left me at the ladies' room entrance, and I went back to my office. It's now 5 to 9, let's say. And I called my wife in New Jersey and told her, "Something's happened next door. Turn on the TV."
Had she turned on the TV? Had she seen it at this point? Okay.
Doesn't watch TV during the day at that time. I said, "Turn on the TV. Something's happened in the building next door, but we are okay." I just wanted to assure her. And I said, "Turn on the TV." So I learned later, indeed, she turned on the TV. I called my dad in Toronto. He was still alive at the time, and I told him the same thing. And I said, "Just don't worry about us. We're okay." And I put the phone down from talking to my dad, and the strobe lights flashed, and the announcement came over the public address system saying, "Building 2, ladies and gentlemen, Building 2 is secure. There is no need to evacuate Building 2. repeat, building 2 is secure, return to your offices using the elevators and the stairways.
Yeah.
Okay, the pressure was off. No need to worry about evacuating people at that point. I went out of my office to a tinier west side trading floor, and I came face to face with a coworker, Bobby Call.
Okay.
And I said, Bobby, I said, do you know what's going on here? He says, well, no. He said, I was down in the stairwells and leaving, and I heard the announcement, so I've come back up. And as he was telling me that, much louder this time, boom, boom, our building was hit on the south side. And the second plane came out over the New York Harbor and hit the building on the south wall, but near the east windows. And it also hit our building with the right wingtip up. So the right wingtip got up to the 84th, 85th floor.
Could you see any of that at your window?
I didn't see any of that, but the left wingtip was way down about the 74th, 75th floor.
Okay.
The center point was 78, 79, which is that sky lobby, the higher sky lobby. But where I was standing, on the west side of our building, nearer the north wall, we weren't damaged on impact. But what did happen, and it happened in a split second, was our room just absolutely fell apart. Everything came out of the ceiling. The air conditioning ducts, the lighting, the whole grid collapsed. And in a brokerage firm, much of your floor is raised flooring. Everything was up on 6-inch pedestals, so all the cabling and wiring was running underneath these 2x2 concrete slabs, carpeted up top, but all of a sudden all of that goes out of square, and it's now just a random walk, if you like, on that floor. And the electricity went off, walls tore at a jagged angle. It was just
And what are you thinking
crazy.
now at this point?
Well, I knew in a split second that it was terrorism. I knew immediately that the 2 buildings were connected in whatever this was.
Because just of your experience, or because of the bombing, or just it couldn't have been a coincidence?
A lot to do with that last comment. It couldn't have been a coincidence. Okay. The fact that both buildings have been hit somehow. I didn't know it was airplanes yet.
You didn't? Okay, you didn't know.
No, I didn't see the plane approaching our building at all. So it was like it was too coincidental. And because I'd experienced the bomb in '93, I put together that this was terrorism. But of what nature, I didn't know.
I heard you say that you physically felt the building sway when it got, what does that actually feel like, a building of that magnitude?
Well,
sway?
As I said, all of that, everything was destroyed in a split second. And then for the next 10 seconds is the only 10 seconds of the day that I was terrified, that I didn't feel like I was in control in a funny sort of way. Not that you ever really are in control, but for 5 seconds, the building swayed to the west, toward the Hudson. And in my mind, I'm thinking, the building's going over. The building's going to fall over. Because whether this happened or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the sensation was that the building was moving 6 to 8 feet. I know that sounds extraordinary.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you ever found out if that actually happened.
I didn't.
Yeah.
And I doubt that it did happen.
But it felt like
that seems a bit extreme.
Right.
But we were used to the building swaying. Like on high wind days, you detected the building was swaying. One of the crazy places where you could observe it very clearly was in the bathroom, in the water in the toilet bowl. Would literally
would sway.
Literally sway. Similarly, in every window of the Trade Center towers, between the window frames, there was about a 3-inch window frame, and these windows went from the elevated radiator, up to the ceiling. Long, tall, narrow windows, level-or blinds in each window. And as the building swayed, it would go click against that frame and then click against the other frame.
There is a solid chance it swayed more than it normally did that day.
It definitely did sway more. But was it a foot?
Yeah.
It could be. I don't know. But for 5 seconds, it went this way. And for 5 seconds, it came back to vertical. And with a noticeable sort of jerk, as all the steel, if you like, went back into square, it sort of like a hop. And this feeling absolutely washed over me. Brian, you're going to be fine. And it was such a comforting feeling.
Really?
And it was odd to describe this, but any concern I had kind of lifted. I knew I was going to be all right.
Okay.
And I reached in my pocket, pulled out the flashlight, shone it around this chalky, dusty room.
Yeah, could you see anything at that point?
Yeah, it was clear enough for a visual. But it was, you're spitting out this construction dust, if you like. We went into the hallway and entered on the sort of the west side. My one regret that I thought of later that day when I was at home was I never banged on the ladies' room door to see if Susan was in there. I learned later that she had gone back to her trading desk and was there when the plane hit. So
did Susan make it?
She did not.
She did not.
No. But I was concerned, the next day.
But thinking about the ladies' room.
I didn't get Susan. Yeah. But anyway, I went down this hallway, and as I said before, these hallways were crossed. I had this firm intention in my mind to turn right when I got to the intersection, because there was no stairway in this westerly part.
Okay.
But on the southern part, stairway C, on the eastern part, stairway B, and on the northern part, stairway A. My intention was to turn right. And as I got to that intersection, I can't explain this. This is sort of the second kind of weird feeling that came across. It was like there was pressure on my right shoulder, like there was somebody pushing me to the left, away from stairways.
Way. Were you by yourself?
No, I had Bobby Call behind me and 2 or 3 other people who had been in that area following me with my flashlight. And we're stepping over the, air conditioning ducts and lights and everything. So I went to the left. A couple more people joined us in that short part of the hallway. And I started down stairway A with my flashlight leading this 6 or 8 people, sort of snake of people. And between each floor was a this way and a that way. Yeah. So as we got to the 81st floor landing, with this people following me, we were confronted by a heavyset woman coming up the stairs with a companion of hers, and she blocked me. She wouldn't let me by. She said, no, you can't go down. She said, we've got to go up. Referring to her friend, we've just come off a floor in flames and there's smoke and we've got to go higher and get fresh air. And everybody got into a debate, higher, lower. And as the debate started, I heard a banging noise inside the 81st floor. I was distracted away from the group discussion. And I heard this muffled cry for help. Help, I'm buried. Is anyone there? I can't breathe. And I just instinctively grabbed the shoulder of the person next to me. Turned out to be Ron DiFrancesco, coincidentally another Canadian from the Hamilton area. And I said, Ron, we got to get this guy. I don't think Ron knew what I was talking about, but we went.
He couldn't hear him?
Well, I don't think he knew what I had heard.
Right.
The door was locked, but the door frame had blown off the wall. And so we could move the door frame back and push the drywall back. And we sort of snuck through this crack in the wall. And as I went through this gap, I'm looking back now at the landing, and all the other people, the other 6 to 8 people, were turning around and walking up the stairs. So they all died that day.
Following the lady.
Listening to the lady's advice, But Kevin York was on one of her elbows, and Bobby Call was on her other elbow, saying, come on, lady, we're with you, we'll help you.
And they all went back up.
And they all went back up, led by a coworker of mine who was on the fire safety team with me, a fellow named David Vera.
And do you know, I mean, I guess it'd be hard to know now, but do you think they were just being told, like, there's really no hope below because of all the flames, like your only chance is to go back up?
Well, they hadn't been told by anybody at this point. There was no communication. This is just what this lady and her companion had experienced moments before and thought this was the best idea.
Do you know it's planes at this point? When you're at this stage, you still do not know if it's just an explosion?
Yes, I don't know at this point. So Ron and I have gone into the 81st floor, and a lot of black smoke roiling in the air there. And I've got my flashlight on, and we start making our way, and this stranger's voice is saying, no, Morty, go this over here. That's right. I haven't seen anything yet, but just hear this voice. And then strange event number 3 happens. Right beside me, I mean, we're literally shoulder to shoulder. Ron is completely overcome with the smoke. He's coughing and sputtering. and he leaves me. I understand
right.
that he leaves me. He couldn't breathe. Yeah. So he went back to the stairs. Meanwhile, I'm noticing that around me is this bubble of fresh air. Inexplicable, miraculous. Right. I don't understand it. And I'm taking almost as much time as I thought at the time. This is strange. Like, I don't understand this.
You're aware.
I'm aware of this bubble of fresh air around my head while Ron can't breathe. It's a very strange event.
In that moment, because you've now, I think, that's 3 events where, we're saying, and I guess, okay, so how many minutes have gone past from the time that, like, the second boom you're building to where you're now have this air bubble around you?
4 minutes, okay, I'm guessing.
Quick. Yeah. And all these things have already happened. You said you felt like you were going to be fine, but in the moment, are you panicking? Are you praying? Are you, or are you just like simply like, boots on the ground, have to get out of here?
More the latter, more just, and it wasn't even a have to get out of here. I'm not thinking the building's going to collapse.
You just thought you'd be fine. You knew you would be fine.
That was my feeling, that I'll be fine. And here's a chance to help somebody.
Right.
That's what I was thinking at the time. So I with my flashlight, now Ron's gone, and there's a story to tell there as well. This person said, "Can you see my hand? Can you see me?" And I dropped the flashlight to where I thought I heard his voice, and down near the floor, this total stranger has punched a hole in the wall somehow, and he's almost like he's lying on the floor the other side of this wall, and his hand is out there, and he's waving like this. And I found his hand with my flashlight, shone it up his arm, and his eyes are sort of looking through this hole. And he says, "Hallelujah, I've been saved. One thing I got to know, do you know Jesus Christ?" And I, almost like Peter in denial, I said, "I go to church every Sunday."
Right.
That was the best I could come up with. I just wasn't ready for a theological discussion at this point.
Wasn't the time.
So I said, "Well, yeah, I go to church every Sunday. Come on, we got work to do." And he pulled back behind the wall, and there's a lot of debris there. And I went over here, grabbed a desk, dragged it over, and I stood the desk up on its end, climbed up on top, and because it was a false ceiling, the drywall only went up 9 or 10 feet, and I'm now up above looking down into this pit where he is. And I said, "The only way out of there is for you to come up here. I'll grab you." He jumped once. I didn't quite catch him. I said, "You must do this." He jumped again. I grabbed him and pulled him up over the wall, and then the desk sort of tipped over and we fell on me. I fell on my back, him on top of me, and he gave me this great big kiss. And I sort of stood up, dusting myself off, and I said, "I'm Brian." He said, "I'm Stanley." He said, "We'll be brothers for life." Oh. And I said, "Well, I don't have any siblings, so okay, we can be brothers for life." And I noticed that I had a puncture wound on my right palm from removing the debris. I guess a nail had hit my palm somehow. And I'm bleeding, my right palm. And he had one of his 2 palms was bleeding as well. And I'm the one who did it. It's not the thing you should be doing these days, but I'm the one who did it. I said, "In fact, we'll be blood brothers."
Right.
And I said, "Come on now, let's get out of here."
Did anyone else survive on his floor that day?
No. His story is, if you have a moment to hear his story, I can.
Sure.
I said, "I'm Brian." He said, "I'm Stanley." So Stanley's story. He worked for Fuji Bank on the 81st floor, and when the first plane hit, he saw, his office was in a position where he saw fireballs, is what he called it, falling from the North Tower. So he and a bunch of people from his office began the evacuation. So this is at 8:46.
Okay.
And our building was hit at 9:03. So he evacuated with a number of people, got on the local elevator from 81 to 78, got on the express elevator, got all the way to the ground floor, exiting the elevator, and the security guard says, "Where are you all going?" He said, "Your building's fine. You're just blocking the traffic coming out of Tower 1.
Oh.
Everybody, peer pressure, put everybody back on that elevator. They rode back up to 78, local elevator, up to 81, and Stanley got to his office on the south window. looking out over New York Harbor, and the phone was ringing. He picked up the phone. It was a woman in his Chicago office, Fuji Bank, Chicago, and said, "Oh, I didn't want anybody to answer the phone. Don't you know what's happened?" And Stanley said to her, "Well, we're okay. They have announced our building is secure. There's no need to evacuate." "No, you've got to get out of there. An airplane hit the North Tower. You got to exit." And as he's on the phone with her, looking out the south windows, out over New York Harbor and the Statue of Liberty, he sees the second plane coming. He doesn't know what's about to happen. He's not, because it hasn't really computed for him yet, or, fallen into place. But he literally watched that second plane bank and come directly at him. And he dropped the phone, dove under his desk. He's a very religious fellow. His Bible was open on his desk. He said, "Lord, I'm in your hands." Dove under his desk. Boom, boom. The first boom is the plane hitting the building. Yeah. The second boom is the explosion inside the building. And everything on his floor was destroyed except his desk. He came out from under that desk and swam, is the way he described it, toward the place where I found him. But he was blocked by that wall. So he knew a plane had hit. Okay. And now that Stanley, now that Stanley and I are back to the stairs, and I shone my light down, that was the fateful first step to say, I'm going to check out where those flames are that lady talked about. Right. And we started down, and we dug our way through a lot of debris.
And where had Ron gone? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, fine. Ron went up and went back up. Caught up to everybody else on the at about the 91st floor. I think he told the story later. And everybody was starting to lie down on the floor thinking the oxygen was better at lower levels, smoke rising on each floor. And he heard a voice inside his head, not his voice, that literally said, "Get up." And he said, I knew from that voice that I had to get out of there and see my wife and kids. And he went back to the stairs and went down. Now, Stanley and I are digging our way through the debris and got through it. I'm assuming that Ron went through the slot that, we'd figured out kind of thing. And he eventually got out of the building.
The other people that were on the floor with you that day, like in your firm, did they try to go down stairs, like different stairs than you, or did they just stay where they were?
Well, what I have heard, I know from experience one thing, and that is when I went back out on the trading floor, I'm saying, come on, guys, it's time to go. Now, the second plane hasn't hit us yet. Come on, business will wait. It's important that a number of them absolutely refuse. A lot of them refuse because the markets are now in chaos. This is the sort of thing that moves markets. That a plane has hit the World Trade Center. What does this mean for whatever industry? Defense industry, oil industry, who knows what? Airline industry, So there's going to be movements in these markets. So these brokers wanted to stay and do business. They couldn't let their customer down. That was their mindset. So they stayed. And we had been trained not to move people physically, just strongly suggest. That was part of our training. So let them sit. And that's when I led the other group down the stairs. They were willing to evacuate with me. So where am I in the story?
So
Ron,
you've got Stanley.
Right.
Ron's gone back upstairs.
Right, but then Ron turns around and comes down.
Does he catch up to you?
He does not catch up to us. We went down on the 44th floor, which is the lower of the two sky lobbies. We went in there looking for information. Now, Stanley has been telling me now, no, an airplane hit the tower. So I'm catching up with the news, if you like. We went in on the 44th floor, and halfway down this long corridor, 208-foot corridor, is a security guard at his desk with a man down on the floor in agony, painful, head wounds, back wounds. How the person got those injuries, I don't know. How he got to the 44th floor, I don't know. I'm assuming an elevator. But the security guard asked, "Do you have telephones?" We said, "No." He said, "Well, you must." Bear in mind, it's 2001.
Yeah, so there's no cell phones.
Well, some people had them. They were
the fancy people,
the fancy people. The what do they call them? The opinion leaders.
Right.
I didn't have a cell phone. He said, "No, we don't have phones." He said, "Well, my phone doesn't work." Now, he's a security guard on the 44th floor. He says, "My phone doesn't work. When you get out, make sure you get somebody to come up to the 44th floor with a stretcher, medic. I'll stay with this guy. So he's a hero in my mind, doing the good deed. I said, all right. So we went back to the stairs, down, down, down. On the 31st floor, it twigged on me. We used to be on the 31st floor, albeit in the other tower, but the towers were identical other than sort of a 90-degree flip. So I knew it was a re-entry door. Indeed it was. I felt for heat, just in case. No heat. Opened the door. We went in on the 31st floor. It's Oppenheimer space.
Okay.
I need to get a water.
Yeah, go for it. Well, and then the other thing I wanted to ask you was, because now you've gone from 84 floors, now you're down to the 31st.
Yep.
Aside from the lady that you encountered who took everyone back up, were you seeing other people, like as you were going down?
There was nobody else in the stairs with us. Not a soul.
Did you ever know why? Were there other stairwells people were taking?
I know of no other stories of anybody. There's only 4 of us that survived from above impact. Okay. Above impact. There were another dozen or 15 people who survived on the 78th floor, which was at impact, if you like. But many of them were badly, badly burned. There were hundreds of people on that sky lobby trying to evacuate using elevators because they'd been instructed. You know, the elevators were safe. Our building hadn't been hit. There's no reason to not use elevators. And we had this 17-minute window between the 2 planes hitting, 8:46 to 9:03. And so we had that window of people being able to evacuate through elevators, through stairways, if they chose stairways. So our building was emptying very quickly. So by the time Stanley and I got to about the 67th floor, which is where the debris zone ended, most people were gone. So there was nobody in the stairway with you. And I also need to backtrack. I forgot a little important part of my story.
Okay.
As we broke out of the debris zone, on the 67th floor, coming up the stairs is a coworker of mine, Jose Marrero, carrying flashlight, walkie-talkie. The fire safety guys, I didn't have a walkie-talkie, but we put our technology staff on our fire safety team. 6 or 7 of them used walkie-talkies in their daily chore. They'd be hooking up a phone line out on the trading floor to a certain bank of turrets, while their partner would be back in the phone room, and they'd test the line back and forth to make sure it was the Morgan Stanley line or the Sumitomo Bank line. So they used the walkie-talkies to talk to each other. And we thought, well, in an emergency, it would be good to have walkie-talkies on the fire safety team. So Jose's walking up the stairs. I said, Jose, where are you going? What are you doing? Come on out with us. He says, no, I can hear Dave Vera up above. He said, he's helping people. I'm going up to help him. I said, well, I'm getting this guy from Fuji Bank out, because Stanley was in pretty rough shape. I mean,
what were his injuries when you found him?
Well, his shirt was gone, and he covered in dust, and bad puncture wound in one of his palms. I was in better shape than he was, at least. So here I am, maybe making an excuse when I think about it, that I didn't want to go back up. I wanted to exit. So he said, no, I'll be fine. So up he went, and Jose died that day. But it was a memory that stuck in my brain.
Do you think when people were going back up, they truly just thought, we just need to evacuate? Like no one could have ever imagined.
Well, they didn't think the building was going to collapse. So it was okay to go back up if you could help somebody. You know, here's Brian from above impact, so that would help Jose think, well, there's really not as much trouble as there might be.
Have you seen? I guess you don't have any reference at this point because like TVs aren't working, so you're not seeing any other sort of news coverage of what it looks like from the outside.
None.
Okay,
no idea. So again, to the 31st floor, we got into Oppenheimer's conference room, and I picked up the phone, wishful thinking, dial tone. Wow. 13 floors higher, the security guard's phone doesn't work, but Oppenheimer's conference room phone works. Nobody on the Oppenheimer floor, they're gone.
They've evacuated.
Stanley and I are the only people on the 31st floor in this big, vast space of Oppenheimer's. So got dial tone. I called home, told my wife, Diane, Now bear in mind that I had called her prior to our building being hit I was calling from the 84th floor.
Right. So what is she seeing at this point now?
Well, she had turned on the TV, and 5 minutes after I had telephoned, right where I had telephoned from, boom, she sees this explosion.
And how much longer are you calling her now on the 31st floor?
It's now 9:33. So half an hour.
Half an hour, yeah.
Plus a bit, I guess. Maybe.
Did she ever tell you in between those 30, like in that 30-minute span, because you called her, she turned on the TV, and then she saw the second plane hit. Did she ever tell you kind of what she was thinking in those 30 minutes?
Well, yes. And what she thought was she had forgotten we had moved to the 84th floor. She thought we were still on the 31st floor.
Oh.
So Brian's fine. The explosion's much higher.
Okay.
My son Tim called her at, I don't know the time, let's say 9:15, and said, "Mom, are you watching TV? Have you seen this?" She said, "Yeah, but Dad's okay." He said, "It's next door, and there he's on the 31st floor." "No, Mom, Dad's on the 84th floor, remember?" And she fell to pieces because now she realizes right where I had telephoned from, explosion.
So this is what she's learned in the 30 minutes.
That's right.
Before you call.
Right. So now on the 31st floor, I'm calling her saying, "We're on the 31st floor at 9:33. I'm okay. Got a great story to tell you when I get home. Gotta go. Okay, bye-bye." She put the phone down, turned around to 3 of our 4 kids and other people in the neighborhood and some people from our church who had come to be supportive.
Be with her.
And announced to them, "Brian's on the 31st floor. He'll be out of the building in 2 hours." Now, I never said that, but in 1993, from the 31st floor, it had taken 2 hours to get out of the building because everybody immediately went to the stairs.
When the bombing happened.
When the bombing happened in the basement.
So she assumed it'd be the same.
It took 2 hours to go down 31 floors because the stairways were packed with people.
When you called her on the 31st floor, is she relaying to you anything she's seeing on the TV?
No.
Okay. You're not asking anything. You're just trying to get it.
No. Stanley's told me that a plane hit the south wall, and Stanley's agitated. Stanley, whether he had a premonition or what, he very eagerly or desperately, one or the other, wanted to evacuate, get out of the building because he sensed it was going to fall.
He did.
Yeah, he was saying, "Oh, we got to do this." And I had one other phone call I made from the 31st floor was to the 911 number. This is rather interesting. I called the 911 emergency number and said, "I'm calling from the 31st floor of the South Tower of the Trade Center. I've just seen a man on the 44th floor who's badly injured. Security guard is staying with him, looking after him, but you must get a medic and a stretcher up to the 44th floor." And the woman on the 911 call said, "Oh, just let me patch you through to so-and-so." Click. And I'm on hold.
With 911.
So I wait, a 911. It's kind of strange. Second person comes on. I tell them the same story. And they say, "Oh, well, we'll connect you to the such and such." Oh, click. And I'm waiting. And the third person came on. And I said, "I have told 2 people this already. I'm not going to be put on hold to talk to somebody else because I want to leave the building." And I told them the story. And I said, "I'm going to go now." And I put the phone down. I was on that phone for 2 minutes and 33 seconds or something. And the reason I know that is because several months later, when I was interviewed by the 911 Commission or the 9/11 Commission, this was the most interesting part of my story for them.
Is how long it took?
Is how long it took on a 911 call.
Do you think they were just overwhelmed with calls coming in that day?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what was...
Right. This was unprecedented stuff going on. So yes, they have an excuse as far as I'm concerned in that moment.
Yeah.
But it was disconcerting at the same time.
And did Stanley make a phone call?
And Stanley called his wife.
Okay.
Didn't connect with her, called somebody at her work, and they were told that she had gone home. So he knew where he was targeting.
Right.
So back to the stairs. Down, down, down. About the 15th floor, Stanley's starting to do 2 stairs at a time. I'm saying, "Hey, Stanley, come on. I don't want to be coming back here tomorrow on crutches."
Right.
So again, I'm still not thinking about...
Are you breathing fine? Is there smoke at this point?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm only 54 at that time. I'm a youngster.
Was Stanley breathing okay?
Yeah, he was okay.
Okay. But it wasn't like filled with smoke and debris and all that. You could clearly go down.
Below the 67th floor, it was fresh air.
For everybody?
Well, I don't know. In stairway A, it was.
Okay.
But there are no stories like mine of anybody going down stairway C or B from above impact. I'm sure they were blown out. Like when the airplane hit with that right wingtip up, just where stairway C would have been right here and stairway B right there. So they would have, stairway A that I went down was way over here and above that left wingtip. So that's why that stairway was okay.
Yeah. All right, so you're down to the 15th floor.
15th floor, and then further on down, we got down to what's called the plaza level. There were really two levels of lobby where you could enter the towers, one from the ground floor south of the towers, or from the plaza level that was between the two towers. So one slightly elevated lobby. We got to this plaza level, looked out the windows, and saw this ashen gray place that's normally filled with people. It's like a park light setting, albeit concrete. There were benches, fountains, flowers. It was a tourist taking pictures of the tower, vendors with their carts and so on, business people going hurry-scurry with their briefcases and so on. Full of people, usually. Now it's abandoned. It's gray. It's ugly. And I think somehow my mind was protected because I was told later there was carnage from people jumping, from airplane debris, people in seats and stuff, that were killed.
But you don't remember seeing any of that?
But I don't remember. I didn't register any of that.
Did Stanley ever say that he?
No. So maybe it wasn't there. I don't know. But we were told it was there later. So we stared for 30 seconds at this archaeological site, this abandoned archaeological site. Down an escalator behind us to the lower of the two lobbies, and at the bottom of that escalator was off, walk down. A security guard, a woman, said, "Oh, you can't go through the lobby here, guys. You got to go in the revolving doors through the shopping area and exit the southeast corner." Okay. I said, okay. So we dutifully did that. And we're just walking. Firemen are putting on their jackets. Nobody's in a panic.
No one was in it. Why was no one in a panic?
I don't know. I don't know. They were escorting people out of that building. Okay. Firemen were already climbing up.
They were. Did you see them?
The North Tower? Up? No. Okay. No, we didn't see any in our tower.
None in the staircase.
Because our tower was just sort of newly on fire, if you like. Or they were using stairway B, which was a wider stairway. I don't know. But we didn't see anybody in stairway A. When we got to the southeast corner, the doors there, a fireman said, "Hold it, guys. If you're going to leave here, you got to run for it." I said, why? He said, "Well, debris is falling from above." I said, "Should I look up?" He said, "No, just run." Wow. I said, "Stanley, are you ready?" He says, "Yep." I said, "All right." What was
your other option?
Well, to stay in the building, I guess, So we said, all right. So we sprinted. And 20 years, on the 20th anniversary, somebody at the National Geographic was doing a documentary that they interviewed me for, and one of their archivists found a photo, and it's a photo of me 5 seconds after that fireman told us to run. It's me in mid-flight running out of the Trade Center.
And put it up.
Or I can send it to you.
Yes, please do.
And I didn't know that photo existed for 20 years. So I was glad that was a flashback. So, my hair's dark and everything.
Yeah. When you are running out of the building, are you seeing other people running? Are you seeing
I was focused. I was focused on the finish line. Yeah.
What was the finish line?
Oh, a couple of blocks south, I ran out of gas and stopped outside a deli. And Stanley was right behind me. I'm disappointed that photographer didn't have a wider angle to see the two of us. I mean, that would have been a classic,
yes.
But it's just of me. And he didn't take a second picture of Stanley that they could find. So I don't know. It was one of the New York either magazines or newspaper photographers had taken it. So it was strange.
When we would see, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple of well, you go ahead.
When we would see it like on TV and the news and the aftermath, it seemed like the outside of the towers and the people running was mass chaos, was just people running as fast as they could and police officers and firemen trying to guide them. Did it feel like that? Do you remember it feeling like that?
No, and I think you might be referring to when the towers started to collapse.
Okay.
And that white ash came out.
So before then, it wasn't the chaos.
Before that, I didn't sense that it was chaos. I was running to avoid any debris falling. And there was some debris around, and there was fire trucks parked here and there, and some hoses and, an ambulance or two. So it was a bit of a, higgledy-piggledy path to get
Did you ever look up?
Only at the doorway. I couldn't accept what he said. I kind of peeked out and looked up, and I didn't see anything. I said, "Okay, you ready, Stanley? Let's go." And that's when we started running. So outside the deli, a block and a half south, I said to the deli, all the shop owners are in their doorways, protected a little bit from anything that might have been falling, but they were cheering us as we ran by the street, almost like the New York City Marathon.
Yeah.
The fans were clapping as we go, go, go. They were yelling.
But people are still standing there. No one's thinking we need to get further away.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is pre-collapse. So I stopped and I said, "Have you got any water?" I said, "We've just come down 80 plus floors." He said, "Yeah, sure." He went back and he gave us each a bottle of water. He said, "No, wait right here." And he went back in, and we're standing there waiting. He came back out with a breakfast platter, this round thing with a cellophane, the sweet rolls and some melons and everything. And he said, "Nobody's coming for this today." And he gave it to me. He said, "Okay, thank you." And we started walking down the street.
How much time has passed from the time that it hit your tower to right now outside the deli?
Right. I'm estimating that we were outside that deli, 5 minutes before it collapsed. The tower collapsed, and it came down at 9:59. Call it 10 a.m.
Okay.
So here we are at 5 to 9 outside the deli. So at 9:33, we were on the 31st floor, and whatever the math is to 9:55, we're at the deli. So we met a couple of priests that had come out the back of Trinity Church on Church Street, and that's the street that runs parallel to Broadway, one block west of Broadway. And these priests had come out the back of Trinity Church. Trinity Church is at the head of Wall Street, where it intersects or stops at Broadway. And Stanley broke down. He said, "This man saved my life."
Oh.
Now, there's no death in my mind yet of any of this. So saving his life, I'm not sure that that's applicable yet.
Because you don't think at this point anyone in your tower has died.
Correct. And they hadn't, to my knowledge, other than, where impact was. But
Had you turned around yet and looked and seen the planes?
No, but almost.
Because you didn't want to?
No, it wasn't that. It was just that we were walking away from everything. We're getting away from it. And also when you go up one of these side alleys, you can't see the Trade Center.
Oh, right.
So we got to the south side of Trinity Church. Well, so Stanley said, "This man saved my life." I said, "Well, maybe you saved my life." And one of the priests then said, "Let's have a prayer, and Trinity Church is open if you'd like to go in." And we kind of nodded, "Okay, let's do that." So we were heading for the front entrance of Trinity Church, but we had to walk along the south side of the church, and it's Rector Street, which is on quite an angle.
Okay.
So as you walk up, and the cemetery's up here. So as you walk up here, suddenly, if you look back at the Trade Center, you can see the towers, because this big wall was sort of blocking our view. And Stanley turned more than 90 degrees around, and he looked at the towers. He said, "I think that building could come down." He's hanging onto the railing at Trinity Church, right outside, or right beside Alexander Hamilton's gravesite. He said, "I think that tower could come down." And I said, "There's no way. That's a steel structure. That's just furniture and carpets and draperies burning." And I really didn't finish the sentence when it was like we were invited to watch. At 9:59, way up at the top, it's a little wiggle, and then one floor at a time, boom, 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 boom. The whole thing dissolves. Took about 8 to 10 seconds to come down. We couldn't see the bottom, let's say 25 floors, something like that, because Trinity Church blocked our view. But Trinity Church also blocked that wave of white ash
the wave of
that came out. It was like a sea wall. The wave hit and crashed upwards. All the energy in that flow of ash blew up, straight up in the sky, and now Stanley and I are in this huge bubble of fresh air. And we realized, well, that's going to fall down on us. We ran 30, 40 yards up to Broadway, turned right and running down Broadway when that wave sort of crashed down behind us. as it approached us, as it was about to hit our backsides, I randomly dove in the doors at 42 Broadway, building I'd never been in before, tiny lobby, and I was still carrying that breakfast platter. Ridiculous. But your mind is in another place, I guess, when all this is happening. Don't want to litter, Right. So we go into this tiny lobby, and I put this breakfast platter up on the reception desk, and 30 strangers, Stanley and I plus, 25, 30 other people, we tore it open, and it was like we were provided for. We had sweetness and wetness, and everybody shared and started yammering about stories, what they'd done. And that's when Stanley told me about his story, that he'd gone to the ground floor and back up. And he also gave me, at that time, we had 45 minutes we were in that building together, not wanting to go outside, because at 10:30, it got very dark outside. And what happened was that's when the North Tower came down. Even though it was hit first, it collapsed second. It collapsed about 10:30. So it stood for a much longer time. Ours stood for less than an hour, our South Tower, just the way it was hit, different structure. But he also gave me his personal business card.
Stanley did?
Stanley did. His name, his wife's name, and the little clothing business that he ran on the sideline at their home. Wow. So I had his home address, his home phone number. I tucked it in my shirt pocket, and we continued to talk, found out he's from Guyana in South America, Indian descent, Asian Indian descent. We do not look like brothers at all. I'll send you another picture of Stanley. But we're blood brothers.
Yeah.
But, so we started telling stories, and then we went out of that building, 42 Broadway, out the back door, behind the New York Stock Exchange, out onto Broad Street. And now there's sort of half an inch of snow on the ground, this white ash covering everything, parking meters and mailboxes and any cars that had been abandoned, and the sidewalks, and lots of litter paper. That had all been swept up in this wave. And strangely, another strange thing happened, that suddenly Stanley wasn't there. I found out later what happened, but at that moment, this feeling swept over me. Well, where did Stanley go? Because he came out of the building with me, and we took a few steps together, and it wasn't crowded. Like, how could he disappear? And I thought, well, maybe, weirdly, this is a strange confession, but was Stanley a guardian angel? Does he exist? And I reached in my pocket, and he had his business card.
So you knew.
So I got my sanity back.
Right.
At that point.
I can totally see how you would have thought that.
It was weird.
When you were standing outside, because you said you were standing outside the church when you saw it fall.
Yes.
Okay. Are you in that moment? Is there any part of you that is kind of like processing what that actually means about the people that you passed or that you saw go back upstairs? Like, are you thinking that in the moment, or?
It's a very good probing question, and the truthful answer is, because I've been asked it before, my mind was in another place. My mind, probably other than the 10 seconds, that when the building's swaying this way and then that way, the entire day, my mind was in an objective mode. It was not subjective. When that building was collapsing, I am not thinking about death, harm, pain, anything like that. My mind is saying, well, now that's really weird. How can a steel structure do that? So it was, without me planning it, it was some form of protection for me. I could get on with my business. I could ponder that, but it didn't stop me from acting. I didn't freeze. I didn't flee in fear. I felt like I was in control of my actions. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm not taking credit for that. It's just the way it happened for me. It almost sounds cold.
I don't think it sounds cold.
Well, I'm just saying, to be that unconcerned is strange, but I'm telling you the truth. Yeah. That's where I was at that point in time.
But unconcerned too, I think, saving Stanley and trying to guide the people towards you to come. Like you said, you can only do so much. You can't physically force them to come down the stairs. And I think you often hear so many people in like a form of survival, and they all have just such different stories of how the mind protects itself. Or
yes.
Do you look back on that day and think you had a guardian angel? I mean, I know you've talked about like being faithful and going to church. Do you look at that? Or then sometimes I wonder too, you know, in a situation like that, does someone say, well, I don't want to say that for myself, because what about the person who didn't make it out, who also believed what I believed?
Right.
Is there any of that takes place?
Yeah, there's confusion. And did I hear direct communication?
Right.
No.
Right.
There's a story a week later which I'll share in a few moments.
Okay.
If we keep going chronologically, I'll get to it. But back to that moment, Stanley's gone. I learned later he had commandeered a guy in a pickup truck that he saw. He sort of ran over to this guy and said, "Take me to Brooklyn." He didn't say, "Brian, thanks a lot, I'm leaving." He just left because his mind was somewhere else, I guess. You know, even though we'd been having this 45-minute conversation inside 42 Broadway and we're blood brothers, at that moment, he was thinking survival and took off. So that's how we got separated. And I learned that later that day, sort of thing, when we eventually communicated. So I continued on Broad Street all the way over to the East River. And the FDR Drive starts at the bottom of Manhattan. And I'm thinking, how do I get off this island? I want to get to New Jersey. As I started walking north, thinking, well, maybe I'll walk to Midtown and who knows how I'll get home tomorrow or whatever. Because now I'm knowing at least one tower. I wasn't even sure the other tower had gone at this point because I hadn't talked to anybody about it other than it got dark. What was that? But as I walked past Pier 11 on the East River, this bullhorn voice, "Next ferries for Jersey City." Whoa, I didn't know they had ferries to Jersey City.
Because you never took a ferry before.
Well, I had taken ferries, but they'd all been from Hoboken over across the Hudson to the west side of Manhattan, the World Financial Center next door to the World Trade Center. No ferries go from the East River around the bottom of Manhattan and over to New Jersey. But what they had done is seconded those ferries that usually went to the World Financial Center and directed them around Manhattan to the East River just for safety reasons to get them away from the World Trade Center. Okay, so I heard this announcement. I run down the pier, verified that that's going to Jersey City, not somewhere up the Hudson or to Staten Island. They said, yep. I jumped on the ferry and they closed the doors behind me. I'm the last one on that ferry. Pulled out of the harbor, goes south on the East River, around the bottom of Manhattan, and started chugging in a northwesterly direction across the Hudson. Now, this whole southern tip of Manhattan's in a cloud of
can you see,
fog.
what are you seeing from your ferry?
I'm seeing foggy sky.
Has the second tower come down at that point?
Yes, but you can't see anything because of the ash in the air. But the wind was blowing from north to south, so when you got directly west of the Trade Center, all the smoke is blowing south. Now you could clearly see the World Trade Center site, and there are no towers there. And you go, whoa, on this
what
ferry.
What is that like?
Yeah, everybody's talking. Everybody's talking on the ferry until we came to view no towers. And everybody just went deadly quiet. It's like, how can that be? Where are they going? It's like a hole in the sky.
Right, like where did they actually go?
Exactly. How could this happen? And in silence, we chugged over to Jersey City, being the last one on the ferry. I was the first one off, ran down the pier. It's now 11:15.
Okay.
And 11:15, is that right? Yes. Now, when at home...
Yeah, so Liz, it's funny because you're telling your story, and I'm thinking about it also from your wife's perspective.
Sure.
In that she's watching on TV, which I don't know, which in person, I mean, you sound like you were maybe a little bit protected from seeing some of the horrors that were happening, whereas I feel like on TV, she probably saw maybe a lot more. And
I think so.
You said that you called her on the 31st floor, and she assumed you would be 2 hours.
Right.
And then how long?
25 minutes later, the building collapsed. So at 10 o'clock, she thinks I'm dead. I did not talk to her until I got to Jersey City. I was the first one off the ferry. I got to the ticket office first. The lady slid her phone across through the slot, and I was able to get dial tone, which I mean, I shouldn't, pardon me, I got dial tone, but when I called home, it connected as opposed to a busy signal because apparently at home everybody was calling my wife. So I got through. Now, Diane has been outside pacing in the backyard with a friend for an hour and 15 minutes. The friend telling her, I saw the friend yesterday, by the way.
Okay.
The friend telling her, if anybody can get out of the building, Brian can. I mean, you say these things, but this is what she was saying. And Diane's quite disbelieving her, I think. Diane came into the house for a glass of water or to go to the bathroom. She passed the phone. There's 30 people in the house. Diane was closest to the phone when it rang. She picked up the phone and she said later, I knew by the crackle on the phone that it was you. Now, our phone doesn't crackle, so I don't know what that meant to her, but she just sensed this was going to be me, and I'm oblivious to any pain they're going through at home. I didn't know she'd said 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, whatever. Oblivious to any pain they were going through at home. I said, hi, honey, it's me. And she collapsed on the floor. We didn't talk. She fainted. A friend picked it up and he said, who's this? I said, well, it's Brian. Who's this? Because he was so firm in his voice. And he said, it's Dave. I said, oh, hi, Dave. And I recognized him now.
You're not realizing what's happening.
I'm thinking, what's a man doing in my house? So he says, we'll come and get you. I said, they're not going to let traffic in here, Dave. He said, I'm going to walk up to Hoboken. I'll get a train home. I'm fine. He said, oh, thank God. He said, okay. I said, I got to go. Somebody else wants the phone. I put the phone down, and there's everybody else that had been on the ferry. They want this phone now so they can tell their loved ones where they are and what they can do. So with hundreds of other people, because there's other ferries coming in, hundreds of other people, I walk up to Hoboken from 11:15 until 5 to noon. That was that walk. And as I walked into the Hoboken train station, the announcement on the PA system says, the 11:30 train bound for Glenrock, which is where I wanted to go, has been delayed, but will be boarding in 5 minutes. So they held a train for me.
Oh, wow.
So I get on this train and chug home and everybody's sharing stories on the train. When I got off the train, there's a guy with a clipboard from USA Today newspaper, and he sees me covered in dust, and he said, were you in the Trade Center? I said, yeah. He said, well, can you tell me your story? So that's the first time I started to record my story, and it got out.
So what time did you actually walk in your front door, or approximately?
By the time I got home, because the Glenrock station they dropped me off at I didn't want to be misleading, but there's facts that are important. I had to walk to another station, and then a stranger had heard my story, volunteered to take me back south toward New York again, one more station, which is really where I got on the train in the morning. He took me back there, and I got home at 1:15. So there's a delay because the train I took home was a bit of a milk run. It wasn't express like in rush hour because it's special times. They were letting everybody on and off wherever they wanted, which I understand.
Yeah.
I wasn't ticked by it. It was a sensible thing to do. So it took a while to get home, even though I was on the train at noon.
Yeah.
It was an hour and 15-minute commute, which is more like 45, 50 minutes in normal time. But anyway, big love fest on the front lawn, horn blaring when I came in. And I remember Diane touching me many times thinking, is he really here? That sort of thing. Yeah.
And then what do you spend the rest of the day and the night doing? Are you trying to figure out what happened? Are you trying to figure out who's made it out safely? Are you wanting nothing to do with the news?
No, I learned by watching TV exactly how our building had been hit, because this was the first visual I had of it. I called Stanley at home now that I had his phone number, just got his answering machine. I learned later he had gone to the hospital, check his lungs out because of the black smoke on his floor. I also went to my doctor, and he said, you got no problems. He said, again, thank you very much. He says, you're fine. He says, I remember checking you out in 93. It was much worse. And it was, for me, worse in 93 because the smoke was coming up the stairway that we were walking down. I had this bubble of fresh air a couple of times that saved me, So
So when did you start learning about kind of who had survived that you knew and who
It was
had not?
Probably a couple of days. It was probably Thursday, because a couple of guys who had, one of our lawyers sort of took charge, another technology guy, they were at another meeting, so they were not involved in that day's activity. Mm-hmm. Yes, they were involved, but not at the site. They took control of identifying who wasn't home, and they quickly built a list of the 60 people at the time. We lost our 61st person a couple of weeks later. The person had gone to hospital but was alive, but heart trouble from the stress of the situation took his life.
So 61 people died.
So 61 of our 250. Yeah.
Did you go to all the funerals?
That was another item that most people don't think about.
Yeah.
But yes, for several months, we didn't relive it, but we lived it again, if you like, by going to the funerals of the victims. Mm-hmm. I was asked to start a relief fund for our victims' families, and I'm happy to say that over the 5 years that I did that before I left the company, we raised a little over $5 million, $5.2 million, which we distributed to those 61 families for education for their kids, for medical stuff. So that was pleasing. And I mean, the donations came from our competitors, the other firms that competed with us on a daily basis. They were most generous. Many of our bank customers from around the world made significant donations. And there were strange distributions too. We'd send a check to a particular family. They'd send it back saying, "Brian, we're fine. Put it back in the pot, distribute it to those people who need it." And sadly, there was the opposite side too. Is that all? I mean, there's humanity.
Yes.
It's just strange events, but it was a good thing. One story I haven't told you is that I think is significant. It certainly is for me. 1 week later, 9/11 was on a Tuesday, and it was the next Monday late, so early Tuesday morning. I was in a deep sleep, and I had this strange dream. And the dream I had was that I was lying in my bed on my back, and I always sleep on my right side and my left side, not on my back, but I'm dreaming I'm lying in my bed on my back with my head up off the pillow, looking at the foot of my bed. And to the foot of my bed comes Jose Marrero, the man we passed on the 67th floor, walking up. And I said, and he's wearing this white blousy shirt. I can't see him from the hips down because he's standing at the foot of my bed. And he's got this radiant smile. There's no flashing lights. There's no tunnel of lights, anything like that. But this radiant smile, he doesn't say a word. He just smiles and nods forward. And I said, "Jose, you're alive. How did you do that? That's amazing. You fooled everybody." Again, he doesn't respond. He just smiles and nods down. And the message I received, or absorbed, if you like, was a very casual, "You'll figure it out." And I shook the cobwebs and looked, and he's gone. Poof. But there I am, waking up on my back with my head up off the pillow, looking at so it was this visitation thing, weird. And then beep, 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 my alarm goes off beside me. And that's when I really wake up and sit up in bed and say, "Well, where did he go? How did he do that?" And then I come out of the fog and realize, wow, what was that about? Very strange.
Well, it was almost like that was the one thing you said to me that you felt like, oh, maybe I should have done differently. Maybe I should have gone up with him, right? Maybe that was your sign that you did do the right thing after all.
But it was, I mean, for me, just a striking, heavy-duty, spiritual thing that went on there.
Wow. In the days or weeks, like I know the businesses are trying to rebuild and get everybody back to work and all that kind of stuff, but I'm assuming you had kind of time off and at home. In those days, are you feeling, like I kind of often wonder, there was so much people, were angry, they were sad, they were scared, they were all of those things. I know you said you felt like you were kind of given that gift that you didn't have the nightmares and that, but for Diane, did she get the same gift, or was she very kind of plagued by that fear of almost losing you?
She was bothered by it, and initially I wouldn't have said anything, but over the years she's come to accept it's okay to say. I mean, she had difficulty for a couple of years. She went counseling and so on. And
I think any woman listening to this right now would totally say the same thing.
But she's fine now. But it was a struggle. She really, really had difficulty. Well, she didn't talk much about nightmares and things, but she was agitated, didn't like me being away, and those sorts of things.
Did you feel like you got a new lease on life, or had you always kind of lived like?
I'm very grateful for the outcome that I experienced, deeply saddened, and that's the one emotion that has stuck with me, is the sadness that infiltrated all those other families, and not just our 61, but all the innocents that died that day. I mean, the people on the airplane that died, they didn't got on a plane in Boston and weren't expecting this. So all of that is sadness. And you touched on it moments ago. 4 months, we went to funerals and memorial services and so on, and kind of didn't relive it, but were taken back to that day and saw the pain that particular family was going through. In many cases where, Brian is meeting the family for the first time. I worked with the guy or the girl, intensely for so many years, but I didn't really know their kids, or maybe I'd met the husband or the wife at a party or something, but didn't really know them. But now I'm seeing them in their pain, so you get to know them. And I've got this relationship with them via the Relief Fund. Oh, right. So I'm communicating with them that way. I'm communicating with their lawyers, their tax accountants, whatever, their doctors, all of that sort of stuff.
Well, and Diane probably is also seeing herself all the time at the funeral of another woman who's lost her husband, and thinking that. Yeah. Have you been to where they did the memorial in the museum?
Yes.
You have?
Several times.
Okay, because I've heard some people say they don't want to see it, they don't want to go back. But I
was married to one of those people for several years.
She was part of that.
Then she went back and said, it's quite all right, and we'll be happy to go again. I think they did a marvelous job. Yeah, they really did.
We went for a few years, 2 years ago, I guess. Yeah, and I just thought it was amazing.
Really well done.
Really well done.
Under the conditions, because there's solemn places, there's historical places, there's sort of action places, and there's memento sections, The flashlight I used that day is in the museum.
Really?
It's got its own display case.
Oh, I wish I'd known that when I went.
The Stanley and Brian story,
Wow, okay. Yeah. So when we were there over Christmas, I went with my mom and my daughter, and my mom took our daughter, who's in the 8th grade, and I often have to remind myself, because Ava said, oh yeah, well, we've learned all about this in school. And the word funny is not the right word, but it's funny for me to think, right, there were people who were not alive when that happened. Now this is something that they're just learning in school, which I think is wonderful that they're doing. But my mom said that they went through, and that Ava knew so many of the things that had already happened.
I have not been to Hawaii to see Pearl Harbor things, I haven't been to New Orleans to see what Katrina did. I haven't been to the parts of California that burned so badly. And that's another thing. Unless you've been hip deep in water, you don't really know what it was like when Katrina hit. Or unless you've smelled the smoke in the Simi Valley fires in California, you don't really know what those people went through when they're seeing their neighborhood burn up, or they're breathing that smoke and fleeing in their cars with their pets, who knows what. So unless you had a taste of New York and knew what those Trade Center towers were like, or you were at the Pentagon and really knew what happened there, it's hard to relate. So,
Were you satisfied with the way it was covered? Like, was there anything you thought?
The museum?
No, like the coverage of after 9/11. Like, was there anything that bothered you in the way that the media covered it? Like, did you think it was a fair representation?
Yes, I do think it was, all things considered, yes. I do recall something. I hadn't thought about this for years, but you've made me think of it. I had one thing come over me that was strange. When Osama bin Laden was finally killed, mm-hmm. and I saw people cheering mm-hmm. about that upset me. Why?
People in America cheering.
People in America, USA, waving mm-hmm. the flag. That's not where I live. That's not, I don't mean the USA. That's not how I feel about things like that. Bad person, yes. Mm-hmm. But to cheer somebody else's death, that's a human being. What have we come to? Mm-hmm. It just bothered me.
That bothered you?
Yeah. And I know other people, listening or watching today are going to say, no, that's okay. He was a bad guy.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
That's something that bothers me.
I'm generally opposed to capital punishment.
Right.
There's a statement.
Yeah.
But to cheer somebody's death, no, thank you.
It didn't make anything better. It didn't take away what had happened.
No. Thanks for the memory.
You're like, oh, thank you. This is terrible. Talk to me about Stanley. What happened afterwards? You contacted him. You left him a message.
Yeah,
did he
good.
call you back?
He did. I was sound asleep at about 11 o'clock that night, and Stanley calls wide-eyed, excited that I had called and this and that. And he told me, I said, Stanley, we can talk about this tomorrow. We'll reconnect. Don't worry. But it was okay. I mean, I understood. He'd been to the doctor, and he just wanted to get in touch and acknowledge the fact that I had called. Really didn't look at his clock, I guess. But then over the next few months, we did many things together, interviews and documentaries and so on. Yeah.
Was everybody just wanting to talk to you at that time?
Yeah. There was a real tug. I did my best. Yeah. I really haven't said no to anybody just because if they're interested and it's educational and it relieves them of any mystery about the event, if it's helpful. Yeah. And it wasn't just that. The tugs were coming from Mr. McGillicuddy in Denver, Colorado, who said, "Did you see my nephew, Charlie, that day?" This is in the following
people
few days.
People wanted closure.
Yeah, they just want do you think Charlie's okay? Would he be in hospital? I'd tell them what I knew without embellishing it. Yeah. And I didn't want to give them any false hope, but I gave them some encouragement, if you like, to stay hopeful. Right. But if I knew something, if I knew Charlie was on the list of he didn't make it, I'd make sure they knew that too.
People wanting to know what their loved ones' last moments were like. Yeah. Wow. So have you continued to stay friendly with Stanley?
Stanley and I, one of us talks to the other every 2 or 3. One of us calls the other every 2 or 3 months just to stay in touch.
Do you live close to each other?
We don't, unfortunately. Okay. Or maybe fortunately. No, we're on opposite sides of the clock. If I live at 11 o'clock, he lives at 4 o'clock. Okay. With Manhattan in the middle. So it's probably an hour and a half drive for me to get to his neighborhood and vice versa. But, over the years, he's come to one of my daughter's weddings. I've been to one of his daughter's weddings. We have spoken to each other's churches. And as I say, we've done lots of documentaries together. I surprised him on the first anniversary. Or was it the first anniversary? I guess it was. I spoke at his church. And the media were there to cover this as well, which I find strange. But anyhow, I took a shoebox wrapped in white tissue, and when I finished speaking, I said, "Stanley, I've got a a gift for you. And he came up, and what I had done was put the flashlight in this box. So I gave him the flashlight that I had used for him to find, for me to find him. And he was excited. He clicked it on, and I'd made sure the battery worked. And so he had the flashlight. And then I guess 3 years after that, I got a call from the museum curator saying, Brian, do you have anything that you'd like to contribute to the museum? I said, well, I don't really, but I've got an idea. She said, what's that? I said, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
So I called because I didn't want to promise anything.
Right.
So I called Stanley, and I said, Stanley, the Trade Center's called for trinkets. I said, where's the flashlight I gave you? Is it downstairs, or is it under your bed or in the cellar? And he says, yeah, it's in the shoebox under my bed. I said, well, here's an idea. How about we go together and donate the flashlight? He said, great idea. So he and I made an appointment and donated the flashlight. It was now his flashlight because I'd given it to him. But it's labeled, World Trade Center or WTC Fire Safety Team. It's the original flashlight.
I probably looked right at it.
Yeah, it could be. And it's got its own display case in the museum.
Wow. Well, I am just so appreciative of you being here today. And this is 23 years, the anniversary. I know you said it wasn't really hard, but does it get easier in the sense of just even talking about it? Or on the flip side of that, do you worry that the longer it goes on, people will start to forget?
I'm not worried that people will forget. I'll answer your second part first. No, I mean, that's, what do we know about the Roman Colosseum? History moves on. That's okay. You don't have to specifically remember that event. And as I've said earlier about, be it Katrina or Simi Valley, Pearl Harbor, these things happened. Most of them sad. Every generation's going to go through one or two of these things. That's life. The recovery is important. And the memories at the time and caring for each other is important through all of that. But things will be forgotten or get less specific. Let's put it that way. So I'm not concerned about that. And for me, it's been pretty constant. My story, I think, has stayed the same ever since day 2.
Well, I love how specific you are. And I think too, just being able to give some insight onto actually being inside the building that day. And your story is just miraculous. I think your family would agree to that, and really incredible. And we're just really grateful that you took the time to be here today. Thank you for sharing your story.
You are very welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course. Thank you, Brian.